Today, I'm going to be building the most fragile house in Terraria. Greetings friends, Khaios here. My last video was me ranking every single block in Terraria. If you haven't seen it yet, you should definitely check it out. Spending the time to research every block got my brain wondering about how I could use them in ways that I wouldn't have before. So today, I'm going to be building the most fragile house in Terraria that I possibly can. But this house needs to be fully functional as a house, and it has to look at least halfway decent. There aren't a ton of blocks in the game that I would consider fragile. The first ones that come to mind are the three colors of cracked bricks, thin ice, and cobweb. In a way, I feel like blocks that are affected by gravity are also fragile, as if anything happens to the tile underneath them, they will fall. So these will be the blocks that I'll be working with today. The use for cracked bricks and thin ice are pretty straightforward. If I use them for the walls, floors, or ceilings, then they can easily be broken. But cobwebs don't count as blocks towards the housing, and slush is stable unless it's falling, so how exactly do I plan on using those? Well, if the cobwebs are holding up the slush block, and the cobweb breaks, the slush falls. While you can't place the slush on top of the cobweb directly, if you build out to the cobwebs using blocks or walls, you can then place slush directly on top of the cobwebs. The problem there is that they instantly break. But there's a weird interaction where if there are two layers of cobwebs beneath the block, then you can suddenly support any block on top of it. So with that, we can place the slush blocks directly over the cobwebs, and if anything breaks them, the house's only solid block will fall. Let's take these cracked bricks, thin ice, cobweb, and slush to a suitable build site. The reason I have picked slush as the falling block instead of any of the other gravity affected blocks in the game is because of the thin ice. I want this house to look like it belongs to the biome where it's being built, so due to the thin ice, I'm going to be building this house in the snow biome. I may change my mind in the future about using slush and go for a different gravity affected block, but for now, we're going to build right here on top of this hill. But before we do, if you're looking to pick up some official Terraria merch, be sure to use my affiliate link in the description. It helps support both this amazing game as well as myself, and I would greatly appreciate it. And if you'd like to support me in a more direct way, please consider becoming a supporter over on Patreon or right here as a YouTube member. Thank you. Now onto the build. As usual, I'm going to start this house off by building the foundation. I want most of the house to be built out of thin ice and cracked bricks so that it is very vulnerable to the player moving around. But I do want to use a gravity affected block, so I feel the best place to put the slush would be in the foundation. That way, when the cobweb below it breaks, the entire foundation of the house will fall. I'm just going to echo coat the cobwebs. We need them for their fragility, not for their appearance, and I do want to try to make this house look as decent as possible, so it's best if I hide these away. I may also change the floor to a different block that can fall later, but for now, I'm gonna just stick with the slush. I'm sure you already see the dart traps, and I'm sure you know what they're going to do, but how do I plan on triggering them? We'll get to that. But for now, I'm gonna start working on the overall structure for the house. I know that I said I was going to decide on the floor material later, but I immediately decided to swap it out for shell pile. Anyway, I figured it might help to shape this house if I started with something on the more stable end. Then I will later block swap the cracked bricks and thin ice into the build and remove the wood. I'm going to be going for a medieval structure, but I'm on the fence on whether this should be a frozen ruin that looks like it should be crumbling, or if I should build a house out of stone and ice in a way that it looks like it's intended to be that way and isn't in a state of disrepair. I'll figure that out as I go along, but either way, I'm going to be using this as the initial building shape. I just had an idea. An awful idea. I got a wonderful awful idea. Two-story building. Cracked brick under the stairwell. It's so painfully evil, I love it. And it gives me another horribly grinchy idea. Teal pressure pads in the foundation, so if you walk too fast on the cracked bricks or if you fall on them at high speed, they will trigger the dart traps and break all of the shell piles. Man, this is going to be a horrible house. I love it. Now, let's get to block swapping these wood blocks out. I've got two ideas in mind. An entirely stone structure that is already crumbling, has holes in it, and is covered in ice, or a stone bottom house with an ice structure on top. Given that I haven't really built an ice house before, I think I'm going to go with the second idea. It's a bit of a worry, as if this doesn't look good, I can't easily block swap out from the cracked bricks, and you all know what'll happen if I try to break those blocks, so let's hope I get this right the first time around. All in all, I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to keep tweaking the roof a bit until I'm perfectly happy with it, as I think it could still use some more work, but the overall structure is looking fairly decent, especially for only having a few materials in it. I'm really happy with how the cracked bricks look when painted brown as well. They make for a fairly decent wood replica on those beams, and I probably want to try adding some to the floor as well. Speaking of the floor, I was thinking about doing an alternating pattern of cracked brick and shell pile, since they blend together, but there are two problems with that. One, I can't get the colors to exactly match. The shell pile is a bit brighter than the cracked brick when they're painted gray, and the cracked brick doesn't quite match the shell pile when it's painted white. It could help if I actuated the shell piles, but I don't want to do that so that I could actually use this as a floor and place furniture on top of it. But the second problem is a bit bigger. Apparently cracked bricks are pretty tough to break when they are a single tile flanked by two solid blocks. You can run along them just fine, and you can even jump onto them. It seems the only way to break them is if you land a perfect jump. So I'm going to be scrapping the alternating pattern idea, and I'm going to be doing shell pile stone replicas flanking the doors with a cracked brick wood replica in the middle of the house under the stairs. And now that every fragile block is in place, I need to be very careful around this house. I'll save the wiring for the very end, just in case I accidentally break a segment of the house, but for now I'm going to need to figure out what to do with the walls. Honestly, walls aren't going to be too much of an issue here. I can pretty much do whatever I want. There aren't any fragile walls, and since walls are required to make valid houses, I figure I can use whatever I want here. The stone portion of the house is going to be super easy. The ice portion, a little bit less so. It really makes me wish that there were some transparent walls like thin ice walls or frosted glass or something like that. They would look perfect here if they existed. But since they don't, I'll focus on setting up the stone and wood walls on the first floor, and then I'll take my time to figure out exactly what I'm going to do on the second floor. I spent a good bit of time trying various different walls for the top floor, and I think I'm finally fairly happy with it. I feel that since thin ice is transparent, the only walls that look decent when paired with them should also be transparent. Obviously, I attempted glass during the time-lapse, but it was just too clean, too clear, so I started messing around with other walls. Cloud wall was decent to do its transparency, but a little too clean for my tastes. In the end, I settled on stained glass. I found that using sky blue paint on green stained glass gives me the best coloration. It's transparent and it's a bit more rough like the thin ice is. So that's going to be my final decision there. Now it's time for decoration, though I might just decorate it while standing outside of the house just to be safe. I'm feeling pretty good with this. Standard furniture on the first floor with frozen stuff on the second floor. I placed a cheeky trapped chest on that top floor so that there's an appearance of a chest only. A normal chest would make the cracked bricks beneath it immune to destruction, and we couldn't have that, could we? That's not the only cheeky thing I did, as this staircase isn't actually tangible. These platforms have all been actuated, so you really don't have anything to stand on here. If you forget, you're definitely going to land on the cracked bricks when moving at full speed, and this house is going bye-bye. But how would breaking those blocks make the entire house fall apart? Well, I may or may not have wired some explosives to it. It's really the only thing I could think of for destroying the walls, so I went with it. So now I'm going to back up this world save, and we are going to see the fragility of this house in action. Oh no, did Chaos forget the explosives? Glorious. This was my first attempt at making the most fragile house in Terraria. Leave a comment below telling me what you thought of the concept and how it turned out. And if you have any wacky ideas for houses you'd like to see me try building. A huge thank you to my biggest supporter for the month. Sarcasm not intended. And be sure to check out my channel artist MythicalWater linked in the description below. Thank you all very much for watching. Be back soon with a new video. Happy building.